It started like any other night shift. I was thumbing through old dispatch logs, sipping lackluster coffee, when my console lit up. 911, what's your emergency? I said, slipping into the habit of clear articulation. The woman on the line was breathing hard. There's someone outside my house, she whispered. He's been looking in my windows, circling my yard. I don't know him. Please help. I've handled plenty of trespassing calls before, but something in her tone set me on edge. Still, I typed up the standard questions. Did she see a weapon? Could she describe him? Then I asked for her address. She rattled off a series of numbers and a street name, and I felt my pulse skitter. Could you repeat that? I said, praying I'd misheard. She repeated it, my address. My mind churned, torn between suspicion and alarm. It wouldn't be the first time someone pranked a dispatcher with their own address. Yet she sounded genuinely terrified. My heart pounded as I tried to keep my voice even. Ma'am, are you absolutely certain you have the correct address? That's where I live. Her breathing intensified. I'm sure, she said. It's my house, and I'm staring at this man right now. He keeps shining a flashlight at my windows. Please, can you send the police? I felt a jolt of dread. Her voice was oddly reminiscent of mine, like someone who'd grown up in the same region, maybe even in the same family, but I had no relatives nearby. Could I have your name? I asked, half expecting a close friend's voice. Marielle, she said, and my skin prickled. The same name, the same address. I stiffened in my chair, ignoring the coffee going cold by my elbow. All right, I'm dispatching someone now. But ma'am, can you confirm again? Is there anyone else at the property with you? No, she blurted. I'm alone. I thought maybe it was a prank by someone I know, but then he started pacing, glaring into my windows. He looks off, like he's on drugs. She paused, voice quivering. Please hurry. I typed a request for an available patrol unit to check out the address, my address. My coworker, Connor, glanced over from his station. I tried to compose myself, but I could feel the adrenaline thrumming through my limbs. All right, Marielle, I said carefully. Stay on the line. Keep your voice low. I just need to confirm something. Which room are you in right now? The bedroom, she replied. The one near the back. I can see him out of the side window. The details she gave matched my bedroom layout. The drapes, the bed facing the door, and the dresser on the left. I felt lightheaded. There could be a rational explanation. A friend with a twisted sense of humor, maybe. But something about her sincerity unsettled me. I keep cameras around my house, a leftover precaution from when my ex-husband, Russell, was convinced we had prowlers in the neighborhood. So I fished out my phone and opened the security app. The feed was grainy, but clearly showed a tall man in a gray hoodie snooping around the side of my house. My stomach churned. Okay, ma'am, I said, forcing composure. You said there's a man outside. He hasn't tried to break in, correct? Her reply was lost under a sudden crash from the camera's audio feed. My heart leaped. Through the phone, I heard her scream, "He just threw a rock. He broke the window." Sure enough, on the app, I saw shards of glass on the ground by the kitchen window. The intruder bolted out of frame. My mind raced. Someone was actually vandalizing my home right now, while a woman claiming to be me was inside. The caller was babbling, frantically describing the broken glass. I directed her to lock any doors and find a secure spot, maybe the attic, though I never use it. But before I could get more out, her voice cut off in a sharp gasp, and the line died. I stared at the phone, stunned. Connor was at my shoulder, looking concerned. I forced out a few words about what had happened, then told my supervisor I had to leave. There was a legitimate emergency at my residence. He tried to protest, but I'd never walked out mid-shift before. Desperate times, fearful of heading straight home, I checked into a small motel on the other side of town. The plan was to wait for an update from the responding officers. The hours crawled by, but no one called. No one texted. All I received were 2 blocked calls after midnight. A deep dread told me not to answer. Morning approached, and I found myself pacing the faded motel carpet, exhausted and jittery. I dialed Connor and explained everything I'd witnessed. He agreed to meet me, even though he'd been up half the night working. When he arrived, I told him the story in detail. He was skeptical at first, suggesting it might have been a bizarre hoax. But once I showed him the archived camera footage, his skepticism faded. The glitchy video showed an intruder, the kitchen window's glass shattering. More chillingly, it showed no sign of the woman inside who had claimed to be me. "We'll check the place out together," Connor said. "I'll bring a firearm just in case." It felt a little dramatic, but after that phone call, I wasn't going to protest. We pulled into my driveway around noon. A police car was parked haphazardly near the mailbox, doors ajar. No officers in sight. Connor looked grim, stepping out with his hand and brushing the gun at his hip. I followed close behind, heart in my throat. The car's interior was untouched, radio silent, no sign of struggle. The yard looked surprisingly normal, except for the broken kitchen window. A few shards glinted in the grass. "Where the hell are the cops?" I whispered. It was eerily quiet, with no neighbors peering out to gawk and no crime scene tape. Anxiety flared in me. "This is insane," I mumbled. "Officers vanish, my house is vandalized. No one's done anything about it." Connor tried to calm me as I marched toward the back door, which hung slightly open. The moment we stepped in, a strange hush settled. Everything was a mess in the kitchen, glass on the floor, a few drops of blood near the sill that made me tense. But the rest of the house looked mostly untouched. We split up. Connor would check the attic, and I'd find the basement key so we could ensure the old pistol was still locked up. My ex insisted on leaving it down there after he moved out. For safety. I wished I'd relocated it after the divorce. I found no sign of the key in my bedroom. My drawers were rummaged, but I couldn't tell if it was me or the intruder who had left them a mess. Finally, frustration mounting, I stepped back into the hallway to tell Connor I'd had no luck. But he was nowhere to be found, no sound of footsteps from the attic. The chill that crawled through me felt irrational, yet unstoppable. "Connor?" I called, voice echoing. Silence. I tried the attic hatch. Empty. Tense minutes passed as I searched the adjacent rooms. In my growing panic, I decided to check on the rest of the house. Maybe he'd gone outside. As I headed to the bedroom again, I spotted movement behind the half-open door. There, crumpled on the floor in the corner, was a man in a gray hoodie. The same hoodie from my camera feed. My breath caught, except the man wasn't moving. In the window's weak light, I made out a face turned partially away. Swallowing hard, I inched closer. My stomach flipped when I recognized him. Russell, my ex-husband. He was deathly still. Dried blood stained his clothes and the floor near his torso. I pressed a hand to my mouth to stifle a cry. My mind raced through every memory, our fights, his obsession with mirror people, his claim that something was wrong with the house. I'd dismissed it all as paranoia. Now he was lying in a pool of blood in my bedroom. I was no coroner, but I knew he was gone. My chest constricted with confusion, guilt, and shock. I heard a scuffle in the hallway. Panic shoved aside my grief for the moment. I ducked into the corner near the bed, not daring to move. Footsteps approached, and a pair of polished shoes came into view. Then another. They stopped. I couldn't see faces, but I heard low murmuring. One voice had that faint crackle of a police radio in the background. The other voice was deeper, anxious. A third set of footsteps joined them, lighter. Could it be Connor? I couldn't tell from the muted, hushed conversation. My heart hammered so loudly that I feared they'd hear me. Then, as abruptly as they'd come, they left. A door slammed somewhere. I drew an unsteady breath, fear and nausea warring inside me. Mustering courage, I peeked out into the hallway. No one. I slipped into the corridor, The temperature felt stifling, and my head swimming in adrenaline. Had those been the missing officers? Why didn't they call out? Did they find Russell's body? Suddenly, a figure lunged from the shadows, hand clamping over my mouth. I kicked and flailed until I recognized Connor's familiar grip. He looked half crazed, with a gash on his forehead and clothes dusty. "Marielle," he rasped, breath hot with anxiety. "We need to get the hell out of here." He didn't elaborate, and I didn't ask. Grief roiled in me about Russell, somehow intruding here, then dying. And for what? But I couldn't process that now. I let Connor guide me down the hall. We didn't look back, just slipped out the nearest exit and ran to his truck. No one. I slipped into the corridor. The temperature felt stifling, and my head swimming in adrenaline. Had those been the missing officers? Why didn't they call out? Did they find Russell's body? Suddenly, a figure lunged from the shadows, hand clamping over my mouth. I kicked and flailed until I recognized Connor's familiar grip. He looked half crazed, with a gash on his forehead and clothes dusty. "Marielle," he rasped, breath hot with anxiety. "We need to get the hell out of here." He didn't elaborate, and I didn't ask. Grief roiled in me about Russell, somehow intruding here, then dying. And for what? But I couldn't process that now. I let Connor guide me down the hall. We didn't look back, just slipped out the nearest exit and ran to his truck. Hours later, we were at Connor's small house on the opposite end of town. Neither of us had slept. While he showered off the dust, I bandaged a small cut on my palm from broken glass. I felt numb. Part of me wanted to call the police, real police, from a different county maybe, but the local officers had apparently already come and gone. So what was I supposed to tell them? That they'd vanished? Connor returned, raking his fingers through his hair. I tried asking my friend at the station about that missing unit. He's not picking up. This is too bizarre. I nodded, blinking away tears. My ex-husband was dead in my bedroom, and a frantic woman claiming to be me had called 911. It was almost too much to handle. Yet in the most chilling twist, no one seemed interested in following up. In desperation, I tried searching for any mention of a break-in or a missing person in local news. Nothing. As if it never happened. One paranoid thought led to another. Russell was obsessed with mirror people and conspiracies. Part of me wondered if he'd walked into my home for some purpose that only made sense in his mind, or if he truly believed something was happening. Did that explain his mania about being replaced? Was he lashing out at me? While Connor rummaged for any contact who could help, I found myself scrolling random corners of the internet for clues. I half expected to see a social media post about mirror invasions. Instead, I found scraps of forums discussing break-ins, missing 911 calls, and people who claimed they'd had doppelgangers. But it all seemed so far-fetched. Eventually, Connor looked over my shoulder, noticing how my hands were shaking. He reached out to touch my wrist. "Hey, you're freezing." I forced a smile. "I'm okay, just in shock." We sat in silence for a while. I kept replaying the moment I'd found Russell's body, the dryness of his blood, the question of who hurt him. Or did he do it to himself somehow? Why break my window if he had keys? Nothing made sense. Now, I'm left piecing together the scraps. A 911 call from a woman with my name and address, fleeing a real intruder. My ex-husband was found dead in my house, wearing that intruder's hoodie. 2 policemen arrived at the scene, never to be heard from again. A string of unknown calls that either yield silence or hang up. Is there a rational explanation? Drugs, revenge, mental breaks, maybe. But the official silence makes it feel like something bigger, or at least something thoroughly covered up. If that's the case, am I next on someone's list? Connor's been urging me to leave Georgia, at least for a while, but I can't afford to uproot everything. I've taken an indefinite leave from the 911 center. My house is still taped up, though it's the flimsiest police tape I've ever seen. I don't even know if they removed Russell's body. The last time I texted the detective's number, I got nothing back. It's like screaming into a void. So here I am, documenting it all in writing, in case something happens to me, or in case I'm declared unfit or unstable. I'm not. I'm just a woman who answered a call she never should have picked up. Every night, I brace myself for the ring of my phone. Every night, I wonder if I'll hear a voice identical to my own, begging for help I can't possibly give. I don't have neat answers, but I can warn you, if you ever get a 911 call from your own address, especially if it's your voice on the other end, don't dismiss it as a joke. Sometimes the darkest nightmares are the ones that never quite make sense, even when they're all too real. Marielle, a veteran 911 operator, receives a frantic call from a woman claiming to be at her address, and even sharing her name. Upon checking her home's security camera, Marielle sees a real intruder. But when the line suddenly goes dead, she's left in a state of alarm. Fearing a setup, she waits at a motel until morning, then returns to her house with her co-worker, Connor. They find a police car abandoned, no officers in sight, and her ex-husband's body inside the home. Disturbing signs point to missing cops, silence from the authorities, and repeated unknown calls. Marielle suspects a cover-up or something more sinister, and she leaves her job, plagued by lingering questions. She warns that sometimes the most chilling emergencies defy explanation, and no one is prepared when they turn out to be real.